Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with some more extra credits. Going into another extra history series, this time the history of paper money, the origins of exchange. I have absolutely no clue what to expect here. I'm assuming, based on the title, Origins of Exchange, we're going to be going back to where we just literally exchanged one good for another. Like, oh, hey, you've got 2 bags of rice there. I'll give you this 5 pounds of beef. I don't fucking know. Um, so probably this episode is going to be talking about trade. I'm actually assuming that paper money is probably not going to be talked about until the last episode because I don't think we use. Well, no, I think some countries did use paper money pretty early on, and then they disappeared, and then didn't get used again for a while. I don't know. I'm a little rusty. Let's go ahead. Before we dive in, make sure you go. Did I say this already? I can't remember. Before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love it if you joined the Discord and followed me over at Twitch. Let's go ahead and dive right in.
How did humanity come to accept rectangular pieces of pulped trees as something to spend 8 to 10 hours a day working for?
Society.
It's a pretty insane story.
Control.
This change from hard currency like gold or silver is a really huge deal. Without it, we couldn't possibly have the massive industrial and post-industrial economies we know today. This change revolutionized how we do business, and forever altered how governments were financed. Learning about this massive sea change in how we, as a species, thought about money can help us reflect on our current historical shift, from seeing paper as money to seeing bits, seeing digital ones and zeros as money. But before we can get to the exciting story of people trying to convince other people that paper was worth something, to understand why this is such a huge deal, we have to discuss a bit about how we thought about money before paper. If we go way back to the beginning of society, we find trade. Before early humans even really settled down, there's evidence that when we met, we exchanged things we had made or things we'd found. But as soon as humans started to cultivate the earth and form societies, we started to specialize, and that meant that we not only loved to trade, we had to. Now, often when we think of trade, we think of long-distance trade. We think of caravans loaded with exotic goods. But for our story, we have to talk about local trade. Because here's where we run into the problem of coincidence of wants. Or rather, we run into it everywhere, but if we fail to solve this problem at the local level, society breaks down, and we can't have the specialized trades we need to run anything beyond the smallest gathering of people. So, what is a coincidence of wants? It's the basis on which trade can exist. Let's say that I make shirts, and you grow food. Well, if you want a shirt and I want food, awesome, we can trade. But if I don't want your stupid food, or if you're all full up on shirts, well, we can't trade, can we? And that starts becoming a real problem for society if I want food but you don't want my shirts. Maybe I can find somebody with some third good that you do want, but that means that a lot of time is consumed by trading, and if I can't find some other good you want to trade for, well, there's gonna be trouble. And this problem runs even deeper than we sometimes think about when you consider the lack of refrigeration and transportation. Imagine I'm a fisherman and you're a farmer, and let's say that we want to trade. Well, there's this problem. Your harvest only comes in once a year. I can't trade you for a harvest you don't have yet, and all of those extra fish I caught today are going to be pretty rotten by the time your harvest comes in. And while this may seem like a very specific example, trade for food was probably the most prevalent trade of the ancient world. So we need to find
Context here because he's not adding it. He's alluding to it, but he's not outright explicitly stating it. Up until really maybe the last 80 years, honestly, we have largely been, humanity has largely been a subsistence living when it comes to food. Like on a whole, like right now, we have so much food that the entire world could be fed. The problem comes in the fact that we do not have the infrastructure to feed the entire world, and no one wants to put the money forward to, build that infrastructure to get the world fed. We have enough food. We produce so much food that the entire world could be fed for free. Realistically. Like, if the infrastructure were there, it'd be no problem to feed the entire world at little to no cost. But what was I saying? Yeah, last like 80 years or so, really in the 20th century was when humanity started to actually no longer be subsistence on a whole, and really now we live in an age that no other humans have never known before of there's enough food in the world for everyone. That's like never been a thing before. That we have never had such a surplus of food like we do today.
Find a third good that we both want that we can trade for. But wouldn't it be convenient if there was some universal third good which everybody wanted and would trade for, so we didn't have to do some long chain of bartering every time we wanted something? Enter money. All money is a third good that doesn't spoil and that we all agree has value. Thus,
I really like this definition that they're given to money. This is a very simple, easy to understand definition of money. Yeah, agreed upon value by all members of society. Most members of society. Those in power in society. 2, everyone agrees to use it. Boom, bada bing.
becoming a unit of exchange, an intermediary good by which all other goods can be traded. And while we often think of coins made of precious metals for this purpose, the truth is, so long as it's durable enough and hard enough to procure, anything can serve as money. Tangent time. Turns out we have used a lot of weird stuff as money over our history. For example, cattle have often served as money.
Yep.
I mean, they're fairly durable, they last for years, they're practical, and they're reasonably scarce. When Europeans arrived in the Americas, alcohol often served as currency. You could literally drink your paycheck. Cigarettes have often become money of prisons and POW camps. Back in ancient China, money in the shape of tools and then knives became some of the first examples of precious metal money. And, my personal favorite, on the island of Yap, gigantic limestone donuts serve as money.
What?
They are so huge that once they are brought to the island, no one even moves them. They just remember who owns which ones. In fact, all of these stones had to be quarried off-island because there's no naturally occurring limestone on Yap. And once, when a crew was coming back from a quarrying expedition, a storm hit and sent their stone to the bottom of the ocean. But the crew survived and told everybody what had happened, and the islanders decided that, it still counted. So, to this day, somebody owns that giant piece of stone money at the bottom of the sea. And even though it's not really in use today, for hundreds of years that stone was used to buy and sell things, even though no one had ever seen it. Giving Yap, in some ways, one of the most forward-thinking monetary systems before the modern era. But if we want to talk about the king of them all, the form of money that has been used the longest and over the widest expanse of the globe, we have to talk about one thing. Nope, not gold, although in fairness, that's what I would have guessed too. Nope, it's the cowrie shell. It's durable.
No, fuck it. I was going to talk about the cowrie shell when, I was waiting for a moment to talk, because I wasn't sure if he was going to talk about this, because I wrote a paper talking about not a paper entirely on the cowrie shells. No fucking way, this was the most used? When I was doing the research for that paper, it didn't say it was the most used. It said it was the most commonly used in, West Africa, and I think maybe East India. So, I'm going to say it before he says it. Cowrie shells largely come from the coast, and really where they mainly come from, I believe, are the East India Islands. Come from off the coast of India to the east. Eastern coast of India. And there were they had so many cowrie shells in circulation that West African kingdoms, sub-Saharan West African kingdoms, used cowrie shells as their form of currency, despite them, having a lot of access to gold and other, they have other materials there. No, it was cheaper. It made more sense for them to use cowrie shells, which came all the way from India, as their form of currency than stuff that they could make on their own, like maybe gold coins or silver or whatever is able to be found in sub-Saharan West Africa in abundance. But no, cowrie shells were in such abundance that they could use cowrie shells as their form of currency, because they had such ease of access to it that it made sense for it to be their currency. Fucking, it's crazy.
Impossible to counterfeit, and without modern harvesting techniques, it's not so easy to acquire that inflation will run rampant. Anyway, tangent over, back on target. We have lots of different possible types of pre-modern money, including the gold and silver coins that we so often think of when we think of money of the past. But all of these different types of money have one thing in common. They are what we call commodity money, because their value is in the commodity themselves. Even cowries were seen as rare and beautiful and could be used for jewelry and the like, and so were thought of as having intrinsic value, the same way we feel gold has an intrinsic value for its scarcity and its uses. Now that makes a lot of sense for a currency. It feels secure and reasonable. You can trust to the worth of that gold coin in your hand. I mean, after all, if you're used to trading one thing for another, why would you ever trade something valuable like a horse for something worthless like a pile of paper? But for gold or for cowries, well, that's another story. But when your economy grows, this system starts showing some of its limits. For one thing, commodity money is heavy. If you're doing massive deals, it gets really hard to transport, and it's risky to transport across lawless lands. Commodity money is also often subject to debasing, where somebody, usually the person who should be responsible for making sure the currency maintains its value, waters down the whiskey, or takes a gold coin, melts it down, and reforges it with a bit less gold in it, and passes it off as worth the same amount. But more than anything, when you get to gigantic economies, the very scarcity that makes commodity money seem to have value becomes your enemy. Like, let's take gold and silver. What happens when your economy grows to the point where you just can't get enough of it? We actually saw the effects of this in our episode on the Opium Wars, where so much English silver was ending up in China in exchange for tea, it was actually causing inflation and hampering basic economic transactions at home. And this really comes into effect when we get to more modern government finance and the financing of war. What happens to a nation when it has to make a sudden drastic uptick in its spending but can't get enough specie to cover its cost, even from those who are willing to lend? As I am sure we will see in future Extra History episodes, it plays havoc with an economy, and even the ability to prosecute a war. And the reverse of this is true as well. Currencies based on scarcity are often subject to changes in the scarcity of the commodity on which they're based, which can be trouble when somebody finds a lot more of your currency commodity. When Spain started to import massive amounts of silver and gold from the Americas, all the precious metal-based currency in Europe started to suffer from inflation. After all those gold coins weren't worth nearly as much since somebody had just dumped a huge new pile of gold on European shores. And as a government, or even a financial sector, when someone digging up a new pile of minerals means that you can't control your own fiscal policy, that's bad news. But those disadvantages are only easy to see if you're a head of state or working on the largest scale transactions. If you're just some average person in the streets, when some well-to-do says that they want to take your grain in exchange for this nice slip of... is that paper? Well, you would be forgiven for thinking that you smell a rat. Join us next time as we finally delve into the origins of paper money, and start to address this problem of people fearing to give up their outdated gold.
Okay, so this took a this is better than the last series we watched already. I will say that it's better than Suleiman. Just the way that information's being conveyed, I find it's easy to follow. I'm enjoying it. And they took this down a path that I wasn't thinking that they would go down. Like, this wasn't how I thought they would tell the story here of paper money, but the way that they're going about it, this is really, I really like this way of the way they're conveying the information, the history here of paper money. I think it's, really well done. This was really good. So I hope you guys enjoyed too. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.